Hi, everyone. My name is Maury Raycroft, and I'm one of the biotech analysts at Jefferies. It's with great pleasure that I'd like to welcome the BioCryst team today. We've got John Stonehouse, Charlie Gare, John Bluth, Helen Thackeray, and Megan Szynski, and Anthony Doyle with us. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
And it's going to be a fireside chat format. So maybe to start off, if you want to provide a 1-minute intro to BioCryst.
Sure, I'll take that one. Before we get started, though, we're all going to be making some forward-looking statements, and they have risks, and they can be found. Risk factors can be found on our website. So the 1-minute overview is our goal is to be one of the next great biotech companies. And there was a time in our history where that was a dream or an aspiration, and now we're well on our way. And it starts with a strategy of coming up with oral drugs for patients with rare diseases that fills a huge unmet medical need, and it differentiates us from the competition. And the evidence that we're making progress is we have our first approved oral drug for a rare disease in HAE, ORLADEYO. We were off to a great start with the first quarter sales, and that great start continues. And we believe this is a $500 million plus peak sales drug. And I think with that success, especially in COVID, when companies have really struggled with launches, it's just a validation of the team that we have and the great molecules that we have and the unmet need in the marketplace for these. And so it all stems from our discovery team down in Birmingham, Alabama, that builds potent and specific enzyme blockers to give us these oral drugs for rare diseases. And then our clinical and regulatory and all the CMC and all the other functions that got us 4 approvals in major territories around the world in 6 months. So we're the real deal.
Very good. And it's a great intro. And you reported a solid 1Q for ORLADEYO. And just wanted to check on the latest you're saying about the commercial launch, and if there are any new metrics or qualitative updates on ORLADEYO that you can share recently, especially as COVID is starting to help things reopen with vaccinations.
Charlie, you want to take that?
Sure, Maury. So yeah, the launch is going great, and we're not surprised, but we're really pleased about seeing the patients switching. This is the big thing that we've been talking about, which is of patients who are new to ORLADEYO in Q1. More than half of them were switching from other injectable prophy products. The rest were switching from treating with acute only. And that's a trend we see continuing. Our commercial team is doing a great job out there carrying the message about ORLADEYO to prescribers. And then I think the other key piece about this is this early demand that the payers are seeing it. Most of the reimbursement in Q1 was through medical exceptions, but that puts a lot of pressure on payers, and it's bringing them to the policy table sooner. And so by the end of this quarter, we expect the majority of patients will have access to ORLADEYO coverage through policy. And so that's a part that bodes really well for the second half of this year.
Got it. And for 2Q estimates, are you guys providing any more qualitative or even quantitative guidance on that?
Yeah, at some point we're going to give revenue guidance. We just want to make sure that when we give it, that we can give accurate guidance, and we just need some more time. I can't tell you when in the year that'll happen, but as soon as we feel that we can give you accurate guidance, we will. In the meantime, the consensus forecast doubled after we showed the first quarter sales. It went from 30 something to 65 or something like that. And our goal continues to be to meet or beat. So couldn't do that if it was a 1-quarter fluke. So we believe that the trend here is really strong and that the launch will continue to be strong through the course of the year.
Got it. So as far as consensus numbers go, you're comfortable with where they're at right now?
Yeah, our goal is to meet or beat.
Got it. Okay. And for EU and Japan, if you can provide kind of a status update on those regions.
Megan, you want to start with Japan, and then you can pass it to Charlie for Europe?
Sure, John, thank you. So with Japan, we're excited that our launch is underway with our partner, Torii. It's extremely exciting there because unlike the US and Europe, Orladeyo is the first approved prophy for patients. And so it's really a build the market opportunity. And Torii was very successful with their Gilead HIV franchise, and we look forward to them applying sort of the same principles to building out the prophy market. And an important point just to note too, with the structure of our arrangement, we get to participate in their upside and their success through the tiered royalty on net sales ranging from 20% to 40%. So it certainly was an exciting milestone back in April to announce that launch.
Yeah, and then in Europe, we're really excited. In April and May, we received approvals for Orladeyo in EU and then UK. So that's our third and fourth major approval in the last 6 months. And we've built out, just like we did in the US, we built out really experienced commercial teams. Our German team will launch first. They're already promoting, and we'll have product to launch this quarter. We get to set our price, and so we'll start seeing revenues soon in Germany. And then we have early access programs going in the UK and then in France. And then the longer term goal is to launch in all countries around Europe over the next couple of years.
Got it. And can you say what the price is going to be in Germany?
We'll let you know when we actually launch. We'll announce it then.
Okay. And Charlie, going back to the policy decisions and I guess in going from medical exceptions to commercial reimbursement, I guess how will that impact price?
So in the U.S., and Anthony said this before too, long term, we expect gross to net from off of WAC to be 15 to 20% once we reach steady state. There's not huge discounting going on in the marketplace. And for some payers and PBMs, there will be rebates, but we'll get to about a 15 to 20% gross to net.
Got it. And I guess just to clarify, is a medical exception, do you get higher reimbursement than the contract?
Yeah, so medical exception is typically more at list price. So it's in payers' interest to establish policies.
Got it. Okay. And also another question on Asia. So we talked a little bit about Japan. Are there plans to go into other regions outside of Japan, such as India, potentially?
Yeah, I won't comment on specific countries, but the goal is to bring it to patients around the world. And one of the beauties of doing a global study is that the package that you have has global application. And so our intent is to go throughout the rest of the European Union, to go to Latin America, to go to Asia, all around the world. And we believe that we'll be able to do that with the package that we have. And think about it, every country after you get past the big ones that adds $5 or $10 million in revenue, you add a bunch of those up, and that's a real contribution to our peak sales number.
Right. And on your 4Q call, you mentioned that real world efficacy is higher than trial efficacy. What is your current hypothesis on what could be driving the higher real world efficacy relative to the clinical trials?
Well, I think in the clinical trial, you're comparing yourself to patients that are on placebo, and there was a big placebo effect in our pivotal study, right? And then what the pivotal or the primary endpoint was the difference between the two. In reality, in that study, so not even in the marketplace, we saw patients go from 3 attacks per month baseline down to 1, right? That's a big drop, right? And what we also saw when we added on the Apex-S data, the long-term safety data, is that there were many months where 50% or more of the patients were attack-free. Well, guess what? That's what we're seeing in the real world. So anybody out there who's thinking that people don't get well controlled on our drug, that they're sacrificing efficacy for convenience, they're wrong, right? This drug isn't for everybody, right? It won't work in everybody, but it is working in a good chunk of the patient population. And 75% of the patients in our clinical study stayed on the drug for a year. And they wouldn't do that if they weren't controlled, right? So I think that's a Wall Street comparison that's not based in the real world. And what we're seeing in the real world is real efficacy and control.
Got it. And just to clarify that, I think that comment around the real world versus trial was made on the 1Q call. And then I had another question come in on just, I guess, with, well, if there's a way to expand the relationship with Torii, and what are your, if that's something that you could potentially do in the future.
Yeah, listen, we're focused, and Megan, you can chime in here. We're focused on making sure they're successful with Orladeyo to start. Beyond that, I'm not going to comment. I think it's really important that we support them in every way, because as Megan said, we share in their success. I don't know, Megan, if you got anything else to add.
No, I think you hit it too. I think right now it's supporting them in their execution with Orladeyo to make the most of that opportunity. And for where they are and where we are with the launch, we're excited about seeing what they're able to bring to this patient population and the real unmet need there. So they're excited.
I'll never forget the trip. It was like Megan's first week on the job, and we went to Tokyo and we met with Torii, and they presented the business case of what they did with Gilead's HIV franchise, and we were blown away. We're both in the Uber on the way back to their hotel, and we're like, wow, that's impressive. And so that's a big reason why we chose them.
Interesting. Well, moving to PNH, well, I guess maybe one other question on Orladeyo, just if you're planning on reporting any additional data on Orladeyo at upcoming medical conferences.
Megan, you want to touch on just the kind of the general philosophy of what we're doing?
Yeah, absolutely, John. So Maury, certainly one of our commitments from a medical perspective is to continue to add to what we think is already a very rich data set, looking at the efficacy and the profile. I think Charlie hit on some of that data early. And so certainly there are upcoming congresses this year. And again, our data set and clinical trials have really matured as we're transitioning to commercial stage. So we haven't said specifically, but certainly a key priority is for us to continue to generate that data, as well as the longer term data, right, now that we've had patients in our clinical trials for an extended period of time. And, again, we look forward to that supporting just what's already in the data set around just how impactful and meaningful the clinical outcomes are for patients on Orladeyo.
I think another thing that'll be a benefit when we're out of COVID is just going to these conferences and seeing docs and having interactions that are more than just an electronic poster on a virtual Zoom, thing for one of the meetings. We hear a lot of people talking about the college meeting, which is probably one of the lighter attendance meetings of the allergy meetings. And they're all like, it's in the fall, it's in November, we're going live, because they all want to go to one of these. That's a big miss that I think we have. And so it makes the results so far even more outstanding.
Right. Okay. Well, shifting gears to PNH for 9930, just wondering if there's an update on the phase 1 response durability and the number of patients still on trial since the R&D day that you can share.
Helen, you want to take that?
Yeah. So we're not providing specific data updates, but we do have patients continue on therapy. That the responses that we reported earlier, I think, are representative, and the durability has also given us confidence with that. So it's on the basis of those that we're proceeding to the pivotal trials.
Got it. And how's prep going for the PNH phase 3s? And can you mention any new specifics on trial design?
Sure. So prep's going well. We're preparing for global trials. In those pivotal trials, we're excited to begin them in the second half of the year. We, as we had mentioned before, we have agreement with the agency on the primary endpoint, which is change from baseline in hemoglobin for those trials. We're very happy with that. We also have agreement on dose and a key secondary endpoint, which will be around transfusion. We've shared that we're initiating 2 trials, one in each population. This will be for monotherapy. Both trials are controlled. And with this program, with both trials, we do anticipate being in a good position for global registration. So we don't have additional details on the protocols to share today, but just that we're making excellent progress. We're making excellent progress also with sites and investigators as we prepare to start, and we expect to start those in the second half of this year.
Got it. And also wanted to check to get your perspective on how Apellis' recent PNH approval and label in treatment naive and C5 experience could affect 9930 strategy and market positioning.
Yeah. So we think the approval highlights the value of proximal complement inhibition. We're actually really pleased to see that validation. Many patients are not getting adequate control of their disease with the C5 inhibitors, and this validates the remaining need and the ability to meet it with a proximal complement inhibitor. It will be nice to have Apellis highlighting this value ahead of our completion of pivotal trials. But we do also note that their product is a twice weekly subcutaneous infusion with a large volume. And so we think there's remaining need there for an oral and an easier treatment method. So we anticipate bringing not only a change in the burden of disease with proximal complement inhibition, but also then improvement in the burden of therapy with 9930 and an oral.
Maury, this is where the strategy of oral drugs for rare diseases, just really creates value, right? It's going to be another switch, right? Another switch strategy where we're going after monotherapy for all PNH patients.
Right. Makes sense. And you guys just had your R&D Day event around 9930, and at the 13-week time point, patients were still on background complement inhibitor, whereas at a similar time point, Novartis LNP 023 for factor B, those patients were able to discontinue use of complement inhibitor. So just wondering if the comparison is relevant, and if so, what explains the difference?
So our protocol does call for investigators in that trial to withdraw the C5 inhibitor and to get to monotherapy. So we do expect them to do that. Exactly when isn't really important to the assessment of the drug. It's a reflection rather of physician preference of the timing of visits and the concurrent medical status for the patient. So it is anticipated in our protocol, and the timing's not really a critical factor. I would make one other point, though, on that question, which is that there's no difference in disease state in PNH, whether a patient's been treated with a drug or not. Previously, the PNH, the underlying disease, is the same. And in the patients getting monotherapy in the previously untreated population, we saw great control of anemia and transfusions with monotherapy in that population. So you'd expect to see the same in patients on monotherapy after having had a C5 inhibitor. So I think that's probably the most important information. And with this great response in hemoglobin and no longer needing transfusions, we have everything we need to go to pivotal trials.
And Helen, I think in the Novartis study, there was like a set time frame where they had to switch in their protocol, where ours was physician choice. So that's the difference, Maury.
Okay, that makes sense. And I guess to dig into it a little bit more, though, for when physicians decide to take patients off of complement inhibitor, I guess, can you provide any more color on what factors go into that?
So they are making a decision, I think, based on their individual patient. But one important point there is that in the context of a trial, the investigators making that decision are the same KOLs who are treating PNH in clinical practice. And so it'll be the same judgment. But again, I would point out that the pivotal trial, and this may be more important to real world practice, the pivotal trial will be looking at monotherapy. And the data set then will be on monotherapy, and the registration data set will reflect that. So we'd expect that physicians would proceed straight to monotherapy with 9930 based on that registration data set when we have it.
Got it. Okay. And for PNH, you mentioned having an additional data update by year-end 21. Are you saying anything additional about what data we should expect in that update?
No, but you can't expect that we will be attending scientific meetings and have presentations on the data when we have more to say.
Got it. And for the phase 3 studies, are you, I guess, getting some early enrollment signals? What are you guys doing to identify patients before you start those studies?
So those studies, I said that we expect them to start in the second half of the year. So at the moment, it's site identification, investigator recruitment. This is something we do really well. It's a competitive space for enrollment and for recruitment of patients into trials. We're also a company with expertise in rare disease trial initiation and recruitment. And so getting to know the centers, getting to the right centers, getting to the investigators and helping them understand that we're listening to them. We're listening to what they say about what they want to see for their patients. We're listening to them also and what they say about what makes a trial easy to execute and get to the data you need so that we can become their sponsor of choice. That's our goal. And this will be a global trial or these two will be global trials where we're doing that on a global basis. So we're just executing on that plan.
Yeah, well, I mean, Maury, we won't have a sense of pace until we're actually recruiting. And so that's why we're not given any direction on when we'll finish. But, as we get some rhythm of recruitment, we'll have a better sense. But that, like Helen said, that's not going to start up until second half.
Right. Okay. And just wondering if you can recap what you said about pursuing additional kidney indications with 9930 and what details about phase 2 design and strategy can you share at this point?
So I think we've shared that we expect to begin proof of concept in the second half of this year. And we are looking at select nephritis indications, so complement-mediated nephritis indications. We have, I think, a lot of examples in the field to learn from in terms of design, but we've not stated yet what that design would be. We do know the dose level for factor D inhibition, and so the dose that we'll take into those trials is fairly straightforward. And I would add one other point. While we're working towards starting a trial in select nephritis indications, the alternative pathway and proximal complement inhibition is relevant in many other diseases. And so this is just a first step. Both PNH is a pivotal trial program, and then nephritis as a second step. And our third step would be to continue to add disease indications where treatment with a factor D inhibitor is relevant and may control disease. And I think there'll be more to come.
And Maury, I'd add, I mean, one of the reasons we brought Helen on board is to really scale up the R&D capability. That includes running multiple indications in parallel, exploring other indications outside of nephritis indications and PNH and where we want to go. And then also building the discovery capability beyond what we've done. I mean, financially, we were in a hand-to-mouth situation for quite a few years, and that's not the case anymore with revenue coming in and, the balance sheet as strong as it is. So, Helen's main focus is to really figure out how do we scale this up to really run a lot in parallel.
Got it. And for your phase 2 study for HAE that you guys ran, it was kind of a nice study design because it enabled you to do some interim data cuts along the way. For PNH, how do you think about that with these phase 2 indications? I guess, would you try to do something similar where you can provide data updates and keep investors interested?
I think that was more dose ranging, right? And we did certain cohorts and we read out, we're done with dose ranging for 9930. That's the beauty. So the proof of concept data that you'll get in nephritis indications, for example, will be at a set dose that will then go into pivotal studies. So that's exciting.
Got it. Well, maybe to clarify that question. So for the phase 2s, how do you think about timelines for those studies?
So proof of concept study starting this year in select nephritis indications, and other studies we'd be assessing, and we'll have more as we arrive at timing for those.
And the beauty is it doesn't take like years to get an answer on are you having an effect either. So so we should get readouts in a reasonable time frame on these proof of concept studies.
Got it. Okay. And for your R&D day, you guys highlighted the BioCryst drug design capabilities and expertise. Do you have plans to reveal any new drug candidates this year?
I'm not sure that we'll unveil any this year. You can bet that we're working on them in the background, and when they're mature enough to share more broadly, we'll do that. But early discovery stuff, it's never to our advantage to show a lot to competition and others. So, but know that we're working on it. And as I said, Helen came on board to help us scale up and produce more out of what we think is a world-class discovery group.
Makes sense. And I think we're almost out of time. So it's been a great conversation, but with the remaining time, maybe if you want to just highlight some of the key catalysts ahead that investors should be focused on.
Revenue, revenue, revenue. I think the launch of Orladeyo is really the focus, right? In terms of what you'll see coming, we feel real bullish about our ability to continue to have a successful launch, and then getting studies up and running, right? Getting the pivotal studies with PNH up and running, getting the proof of concept studies up and running are key.
Got it. Okay. Well, it was great seeing you all today, and thanks for joining for the fireside discussion.
Thanks, Maury.
Thanks, Maury.
Thanks.
Thank you.